tarde. Esse é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas com a Reitoria Digital da Universidade Federal de Goiás e a Mississippi State University. Temos o apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Fazem parte deste programa Andréa Luiza Teixeira, coordenadora, Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, eu, Rosângela Seba, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes. I'm going to speak in English because today eu vou falar em inglês, porque hoje nós estamos entrevistando um colega e pianista, Kevin Chance. This is a program of the School of Music in Performing Arts with the Digital Department of the Federal University of Goiás and Mississippi State University. We have the support of the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology, the Center for the Study of Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the University Nova de Lisboa, the Center for Brazilian Studies, University Radio and Radio Brasil Central FM. The program includes Andréa Luiza Teixeira, coordinator, Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, Sérgio Paiva, Wesley de Menezes, e eu, Rosângela Seba, professor of music from the Department of Music at Mississippi State University. Good afternoon to all, and I will invite my friend Kevin Chance from University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa. Hi, Kevin, how are you?
I'm great, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
We have here one of my colleagues. I always admire his performance as well as his work as a teacher, piano teacher. And we're going to start with broad questions, and anybody right now participating, I will bring their questions and I'll ask to you, okay? So let's start, Kevin. I got to know you 20 years ago when I moved to Starkville, and I started working. You were a young man teaching piano at the School of the Arts, I think, in Alabama. And I got to know your students as well. In fact, I was judging some of them, and I always thought they sounded pretty good. It's a good teacher. And then I got to know you. So tell me more about your experience, how you started learning music, piano, and how you got to where you are right now.
When I was young, we went to church every Sunday. My parents always took us to church on Sundays. And I think I was always drawn to the music. And my mother was a pianist, so we had a piano in the house. She studied all through elementary, through high school and into college. And when I would come home from church, as soon as I could reach the keyboard, I would start trying to play the hymns by ear. And evidently, you could kind of recognize what they were. So my mother was smart enough to realize that there was some amount of ability there. So she called her piano teacher in Troy. Her name was Violet Irvin. And I had my first piano lessons over the telephone. So my mom would be, back then we didn't have cordless phones, so we had the cord coming all the way from the kitchen around to where the piano was. And my mom was on the phone with her teacher giving me lessons over the telephone. And when we would come to Troy to visit my grandparents, she would take me over to Ms. Irvin's house and we would have a live lesson. So this went on until I entered first grade. And at that point, Ms. Irvin said, he really needs regular lessons. She set me up at the conservatory at Birmingham Southern College. She knew some really fine teachers over there, and I went to interview, and I started studying with a lady named Edna Brown. And when I went to study with her, I had my interview, and I guess I played America the Beautiful. And she could recognize it, so she never played another note for me because she really was insistent that I learn how to read. So she wanted to focus primarily on developing reading because she knew the ear was in pretty good shape. And I think like most kids, I went through spurts of motivation and also spurts of times when I probably begged to quit and begged to change teachers and begged to do anything, especially as a boy. I think I wanted to do anything but piano sometimes. And as a teenager, I think I also went through periods where I guess I always knew I was good at it. I won the competitions, and I probably not always putting in as much time as I should have. But something kept pulling me back to music. And when I went to college, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I got credits for my science classes from AP exams. So I didn't have to take any science in college. And I thought, that actually sounds like a pretty good thing. So doctor went by the wayside. I kept playing. And then I thought, well, maybe I want to be a lawyer. But I didn't really want to take the LSAT. And so I'm still playing the piano. And I actually ended up getting an English degree for my undergraduate degree. It was kind of a long story. I'd studied with the same teacher for a very long time. And we sort of reached a point where it just was no longer a productive relationship. So I decided, instead of changing schools, I had a great scholarship where I was, and it was an academic scholarship. I thought it might be the last chance in my life I had to do something different. So I decided to get an English degree. So I was English major by day, pianist by night. And I started studying with another teacher who was in Birmingham at the time. And she was a godsend to me. Her name was Betty Sue Shepard, and she was a completely different kind of pianist than the very rigorous, controlling type of teacher I had before. So I had a nice balance. And even at one point, I thought about becoming a teacher of English. I thought about getting a PhD in comparative literature. But I went to have lunch with one of my English professors, and he said, well, the job market's terrible for both. So when you're done, do you want to be looking for a job by trying to publish about some obscure author somewhere? Or do you want to be trying to beat the bushes to find concerts to get a job in the music field? And I said, well, that answers my question. So I just went on to study at Louisiana State University with a really wonderful teacher there named Connie Carroll. Those were two of the greatest years of my life. And I would have stayed with her for a doctorate, but she wanted to retire, and also said, you need to go somewhere else. You need to go to a bigger school. So she was a graduate of Eastman, and I think really wanted me to go there. And I found a teacher there named Barry Snyder, who was a wonderful mentor. And so I did my doctorate at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. Another great institution with really wonderful teaching, incredible opportunities to develop my musicianship. And in the summers, I went to Aspen, where I got to study with a guy named Herbert Stesson, who used to teach at Juilliard, who did a lot to help me technically. And I spent 2 summers also with Anne Shine, who was like studying with the most terrifying grandmother I've ever had. She was so nurturing, but you wanted to please her so much that you just couldn't bear the thought of letting her down. I don't think
She probably was in an advanced age at the time, right?
She was probably, I think she was younger than I thought she was. I think she probably was in her 60s, but she had sort of a grandmotherly, very maternal presence about her. And she didn't take very many of us to study with her those summers. And so you got 250% out of her at every lesson. You knew whenever you had a lesson called, I cleared the whole afternoon, because I knew if my lesson was at 1, I could be in there until 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Because there was no sense of time when she was teaching. You were there until she finished whatever it was she wanted to accomplish.
And did you have lessons with her weekly or twice a week in Aspen?
It depended on her performing schedule. She was a great model for me for learning how to protect my time. Because if she had a concert coming up, she did not teach. And not only did she not teach, she expected us to be her page turners in rehearsals. So, at first I thought, I need to be practicing. I don't need to go turn pages for you in a 3-hour rehearsal. But I remember I was turning pages for a rehearsal of the Stravinsky Les Noces for choir, orchestra, 4 pianos. So it's a really big production. And just watching how she communicated in the rehearsal, watching how she marked her score, watching how she was observing the room, those were some of the most incredible lessons I ever had from her. And it really made an enormous impact on me on how important it is for our students not only to hear the things we have to say in the lessons, But the way you keep getting return engagements is by, if you're a good colleague and you know how to function well in a rehearsal, you'll be asked to play again. And I love collaborating. And I feel like one of the greatest lessons I got from her was really learning great rehearsal etiquette and learning how to come prepared, how to communicate with respect, but also getting your point across in a rehearsal. And she was is an absolute master of that.
Yeah, I think one of the things also that I learned is to observe the teachers, but also when you play with them. And I think it's the nonverbal language that the music replaces with that. But anyway.
Absolutely.
So, we performed together, and as you said, I learned a lot from you. I was a very new person playing the Bartók, the sonata for 2 pianos and percussion. And you pretty much handled the rehearsal for me.
Well, I learned a lot from you too. I thought that was such a wonderful collaboration because, we're very different people. That's the great thing about music. We all bring something different to the table, but you were always so prepared for the rehearsals and it was so easy to put it together. And that's such a monster of a piece. Oh my gosh.
I've never played that before. And to tell the truth, I learned the music basically in a week.
Yeah.
Because I was so busy and I kept postponing and we didn't have a time frame anyway. But I just learned. And one of the things that I enjoyed it was not only that you were helping us, me especially, but you were helping the percussionist also. So for those who don't know about this work, Bartók wrote a sonata for 2 pianos and 2 percussionists. And we sit side by side, right? And then the percussion is in front of us. There are other ways to display, I think, right? On stage, right, Kevin?
Yeah, Bartók actually puts in the front of the score the diagram of how he wants the stage set up. So the pianists typically have their back to the audience and the percussionists are facing the audience. So it's a very different setup than what we're used to as pianists.
That's correct. We usually just sit side by side. Yeah. Can you tell me how, talking about your experience as a young pianist, how did you come to the point where you said, I want to teach? I want to now become a professor? And you kind of explain a little bit, but tell us more about that.
Teaching, as much as I love to play, I love being on stage. I love getting to share music with all my friends, with my audiences, and I need it. I need to play. But I probably most identify as a teacher. When I was growing up, I would come home from school and I would want to play school. I would want to be the teacher. And I tortured my little brother into being my student and grading his papers for probably year after year after year. And I didn't quite always understand I wanted to teach piano, even though my parents, I think, still have some of the little pictures I drew in elementary school where I was saying I wanted to grow up to be a piano teacher. But what I always had an intense desire to do was to help people. There was a brief time in high school I even thought about becoming a minister. So I think there's always been a really strong desire for me to be able to reach people, especially one-on-one. And I think that's what ultimately drew me to being a piano teacher, because what I really live for is that opportunity to help somebody achieve something they didn't know they could do. And those moments in piano lessons where, as I tell my students, I want you to come in with your hands dirty. I want you to have dug into a score. I want you to have practiced and achieved everything you can on your own. But come with questions and come with spots that you just can't quite figure out, you can't quite conquer, because that's when I feel like we can have the most dynamic lessons. And when students come in with that level of preparation, it's so exciting to figure out exactly how something needs to be tweaked physically in the body, if it's a technical issue, or reframing something mentally for them or psychologically to help them hear a passage differently, or if it requires me to demonstrate something so they can hear the shape of a gesture differently. But seeing that twinkle in their eye and seeing the smile come across their face when they reach that level of success is worth every minute of the stress that's involved in piano teaching. As I think my brother's a band director, and we've talked a lot about how different our teaching is. And I think there's a lot of, obviously every job is challenging, and he's working in a classroom environment that has its own issues. But I think he sometimes thinks that, oh, you just, you show up and just do your job. It can't be that hard. Oh no, it's incredibly hard, because having to reach a different person every hour, who comes in with a different learning style and who so much identifies with what we do. I think that's what people don't really understand about being pianists. It's such a part of our identity.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to teach a really talented person who attaches their identity so deeply to what they're doing, because I always want to criticize the work. I don't want to criticize the person. And I think that's something that I find both difficult and rewarding to do, because when I can do it really effectively, I feel like we have really good learning, because I can usually see a student shut down really quickly when they feel like they've been attacked. And that's what I always want to avoid in a lesson. I mean, none of us are perfect, and there are times when students need to be, they need to be told they need to practice better, or they need to reprioritize things in their life. But we're learning something that's incredibly difficult. We play an instrument that's not very ergonomically designed. Mm-hmm. We're all dealing with different physical challenges that we have in our bodies. And I think we have to always keep the student and the work separate from each other. And, and
do you also that it's hard for them to understand that when you criticize them, you are not criticizing them, but they are criticizing the work itself?
Yeah, and this is where I think my English degree has really helped me. I've never regretted doing that other degree, because I really feel like it's given me a better command of language sometimes, so that particularly with students who I know are very sensitive, I can be much more thoughtful about the type of vocabulary that I use. And especially, I would say also with international students. I have a lot of Asian students in particular. And due to language barriers, sometimes I think I have to be really careful about what words I choose. First of all, to make sure that they really understand the meaning of it, but also that they understand the idiomatic usage that I might be using. So very frequently, if I know I'm about to say something that might sting, if they interpret it the wrong way, I like to start with, I'm not criticizing you, but, because I think it's important that they hear that first before they start to process what may come after. Because the other thing about teaching, I think there are a lot of times students want to be patted on the back. Mm-hmm. And they just want us to tell them what's good. And it's like I always preface the school year with, I'm not here to tell you how good you are. I admitted you into my studio because I believe in you, and I believe you have something to offer. So I don't want to waste our lesson time pointing out every single thing and every measure that's going well. If I don't mention it, assume it's good. If something really improves, I'm going to point it out. But I'm going to spend the bulk of our time trying to build what you need to be better. And that's not always easy for students to remember. And certainly I remember feeling that way when I was a student too. I mean, there are lessons when I really wish probably I could have been built up a little bit more. But when I went back to the practice room and got back to right down to business, I certainly got better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I found quite different here in America is that this carefulness that you're having, we didn't have that in Brazil. The teachers were there to pound and tell you how bad you are, but at the same time, I took it as because they were caring, because they wanted me to improve. And so, and also we are dealing with different generation now that is...
It's even when I was growing up, I mean, I left many a lesson crying. And I remember even when I was a kid, I think I was playing the Haydn D major sonata and I missed one too many F sharps. And I remember even little old Miss Brown said, I think your mother's still waiting outside in the car. Why don't you go home and practice and fix that F sharp, and I'll see you next week. And, now we can't teach that way anymore. Mm-hmm. It's a very different generation. There are different expectations. And I think a challenge sometimes is getting students' attention, Because, I did not look forward to getting back in the car after 5 minutes and having my mother look at me and say, because obviously she knew something was wrong. But there are times we do need to get students' attention because every minute is precious.
Yeah.
If you think about other disciplines, you're in class every day. Or even in college, you're in class twice a week or 3 times a week. With piano, we don't have that luxury. We get to see most of these students once a week. And if I'm lucky, sometimes I'll have some pre-college students that want to come twice a week. But, I'm busy too. And I would like to be able to offer that to every student, but I have to protect my time. Yeah. And it's the tradition of how we teach largely that we see students for an hour a week. So I feel like we need to engender in the students how important that hour is. It's like the sacred hour. If this is what you really want to be doing, you need to come in ready to take every possible ounce we can give you during that hour away.
So, Kevin, I can see the passion, the teaching in your teaching, and when you were talking about your teaching. And I know that you are heavily involved with MTNA. And for those who don't know what MTNA is Music Teachers National Association, which is a national association of all teachers, but it's heavily with piano teachers. In each state has its own affiliation. So you are involved with the Alabama Music Teachers Association. I am involved with the Mississippi Music Teachers Association. I think I am on my 4th different office. And then we have different regions as well. So it's an umbrella that opens. And talk more about it. Tell me the offices that you held nationally, in state and regional. And talk more about what we were talking before, the international program that they are opening right now.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about why I got involved. When I was growing up, I loved competing. And I think, that was something I loved, getting up and, throwing my hat in the ring to see if I could win. And it kept me motivated. And what I came to realize during all those years of competing growing up in these events that MTNA was sponsoring, I kept seeing a lot of the same faces who were organizing. And eventually it dawns on you when you start teaching that there are a lot of behind the scenes hours that go into making all of these opportunities happen. And those opportunities are largely why I'm still sitting at the piano every day. So I really felt very compelled as soon as I got into the profession to start giving back, to help, in my mind, ensure future generations of students were as inspired as I was to play and to have opportunities to compete and to perform. And so I just started teaching in Alabama, and they called me to become the vice president of AMTA, Alabama Music Teachers Association. So I didn't know what I was saying yes to, but I said, sure, I'll do it. And that meant I had to plan our conference. One thing in MTNA is we love conferences. We like professional development. So I spent 2 years planning our state professional development conference. Then I became the president of AMTA. Then I was the immediate past president for 2 more years. And then I went on to serve as the state clinician. So my job as state clinician is to train our judges. And I also run our state piano auditions. And so we have about 400 or 500 students that compete in those every year. And that was one of the events I most look forward to every year. So that's one of the reasons I've kept doing it for as long as I have, just because I feel compelled to give back to the poor people that ran that competition for all the 12 years that I competed in it. Once I got involved at the state level, the national people, I got on their radar. So I started being asked to do things at what we call the division level. So this is, there are 9 states in our division. So I was asked to run this high school competitions for the 9 states. So I did that for a few years, and then I became the chair of all the competitions for the region, for the division. And after a few years of doing that, I started being nominated to serve on the national board. So I served as the director of Southern Division, which is the national board position that's over those 9 states. And I just finished a term as the national vice president of MTNA. And it's really pretty remarkable what the organization can offer. We are a pretty solitary profession. We are teaching one-on-one, and some people have opportunities to teach in larger studios where you see other teachers every day, but many of us teach out of our homes. Mm-hmm. And what MTNA has really given me is the opportunity to network. At my state conference, I get to meet other teachers in the state every year. And at the national conference, I get to meet people who are doing the same thing I'm doing from all over the country, and now internationally, because one thing MTNA has started doing is branching out and offering international memberships. So in particular, we've had a lot of interest in China. MTNA China is starting to build fairly quickly. The COVID has slowed things down a little bit, but we had quite a bit of momentum before the COVID pandemic. We've also had interest in India starting, getting some grassroots efforts in place to get MTNA started there. And if people are interested from anywhere in the world, they can affiliate with MTNA. So if people in Brazil are interested, there certainly are opportunities. We have a national conference every year. This year it was virtual. Next year it will be in person in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We also have a journal, a magazine that's published, I think, 6 times a year. And that's something that's also sent to all the international members. And we also are holding a lot of webinars. So these are like sessions you would have at the national conference, but much like we're doing today, they're held virtually over the internet. So you get that content all year, and it's archived for our members as well.
Do you think that I believe that COVID had made us all be more online than we were before? And as I always tell, there's always bad and good in everything in life. Do you think that had helped the webinars and to become more popular?
Absolutely. And I've told many people, I feel like we were so lucky that this pandemic hit now rather than 10 years ago or 20 years ago, because we at least had the technology available now and widely available enough that we were able to find some sense of continuity. MTNA had started doing webinars. Once COVID hit, we were able to expand the webinars on a much larger scale, and they had worked out the technology so that it was very easy for them to manage them. We were also able to produce entirely virtual conferences for the first time. So, and even teaching online, I think I had never taught online prior to COVID, and my university closed, and I was basically told, you have a week to get ready to teach everybody on Zoom. So I was frantically trying to find a webcam, and I was trying to find microphones, and of course they were nowhere to be found because everybody was looking for them. So we all had to pivot very quickly. But I think it's a horrible thing, but I feel like some good is going to come out of it. And in terms of the teaching, I feel like some of my students have actually improved more during the virtual teaching, because I think it really challenged them to take more ownership over their practicing. It required them to not be so dependent, because there were more limitations, obviously, with what we could do.
Yeah, and I think also all the extra that they were doing was canceled.
Absolutely.
I taught some of my pre-college because I also believe in that. We're going to talk about this, but I also believe that even though we are teaching at university, we still have to give to the pre-college. Mm-hmm. And some of my pre-college students got better just because all the camps and everything was gone. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
Can you tell more about the competitions that MTNA and just so everybody understands that each state has also evaluations. Here at Mississippi, we are neighbor universities and neighbor states. I am the chair of the district evaluation, so I pretty much write all the theory and year training and history and also performance guidelines for the state of Mississippi. So we have the evaluations. Can you talk more about, in general, MTNA and how it is organized so students can participate, be evaluated, and also have competitions? Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Each state develops their own state syllabus, their own state competitions, their own state festivals. And these largely, in most states, are available to any student. In Alabama, I know we write our syllabus so that even the most average student can participate. They may not be a state winner by the time they advance to the final round, but they all have the opportunity at their local level to perform for a judge and get feedback. So I think the states are really charged with finding opportunities for kids at every level. With MTNA as a national organization holds the MTNA national competitions. And this gets a little confusing because they also have a state level component. And the MTNA national competitions are really geared towards students who are music majors or who are in a track to become a music major. For Alabama's competitions, you only have to play usually 3 memorized works of contrasting style and some keyboard theory. If you want to do the MTNA national competitions at the junior level, this is for students who are around between ages 12 and 14, they need to perform at least about 20 minutes of music. For the high school level, the ages 15 to 18, it's about 30 minutes of music. And for the young artist collegiate level, which goes up to age 26, I believe, that's around a 40-minute program. So, and at the initial level, you compete in your state. And if you're a state winner, you compete with the 9 other winners from the Southern Division. So that each state has one winner who goes forward to represent them. The winner of your division then advances to the national finals. So this competition really lasts almost a year. The first round is usually in October or November. The second round is in January, and it's held virtually. The final round is in March at the national conference.
Yeah, and also each state has their own evaluations and curriculum as well. And besides that, we also have Federation of Music Clubs that students can participate. We have several festivals that they can participate as well. So in Brazil, I can talk more about Brazil and comparing that. We have a lot of competitions, but that's about it. We don't have evaluations. If we don't get a feedback from the judge, we get an award if we get an award. But I think MTNA has been a very good source for me as well when I became a teacher, a college teacher here at Mississippi. And because I also, as you said, networking. And I had several friends that were already on the board and helped me to get to the board. But once you're there, it's hard to get out because...
Yeah, we all want good help. The other thing I'll say about the festivals and evaluations, I think the philosophy here with MTNA, as well as through most of our states, is they really want to put most of the focus on the feedback given from the judge. At most all of our events and evaluations, there's at least one judge, and sometimes as many as 3 or 5 judges, who are all writing individual critiques. And those critiques go back to the student. And for me as a teacher, I feel like those are incredibly valuable. And, Rose, you're always such a good judge. We always love it when you're judging for us over in Alabama, because we as teachers need to hear what other teachers are hearing in our students. But also it helps the students to sometimes hear that another teacher is saying the exact same thing I'm saying. So maybe you need to go pay attention to this. For me, I think the most incredible learning experience as a teacher is to learn different vocabulary. For me, the barrier of the language is a little over, but still there. But learning how to say the same thing in different ways. And also sometimes I'm a very oriented technical person, although I aim for the musicality. Mm-hmm. But also sometimes when the students read what the judge says, it's like, it's a different perspective of what I was
trying to say. Anyway, it is always very good. And I encourage anybody that is watching us right now to reach out to MTNA or either Kevin or me, and we can address you to the headquarters, and they can help you establish MTNA or a chapter in your country, because it is a way also for you to network with international musicians in your same profession.
Well, I'll say we've had some members from MTNA China come to our national conference in the different cities where we've met. And often they've even had like sort of individual tracks. I mean, where some of them have planned excursions, so they've made it into sort of a vacation in addition to being a conference trip. But most importantly, I think it's really our competitions that have have created a lot of this interest. We get a lot of international students from China at all the different conservatories and universities in the US, and many of them have come here and participated in these competitions. So they've gone back to China and wanted to create similar experiences there. So I think that's really what's driven a lot of the initial interest in this. And if you're interested, I hope you'll pursue it.
Yeah, I went to Taiwan a couple of times, and they are trying to establish something very similar to that. What I did for 6 weeks was basically judging them every hour, minute, and a lot of them. And I think the first time I judged over 1,300 kids. Yeah, and gave a master class, which is sometimes happens at MTNA as well, especially for the national competitions. And is it true that they are still giving the piano part, not the chamber music, a piano? They used to give a piano for the winner.
I'm not sure, because I think we had several winners who were from China and then didn't know how to get the pianos back to China. But now that Steinway has a presence in China, this might have changed. I don't quote me on that, but they do post whatever the current prizes are on the website.
I had a roommate. That's funny to say, because I had a roommate, my first roommate. She was from Japan, Mitsuko, and she won the national competition. And I remember I said, "My gosh, you got a Steinway." And she said, I'm selling. And I'm like, what? I said, sent to Japan, no room. Well,
yeah. Well, exactly. So, I mean, you can kind of understand why they might have changed it over the years. But it's, at the very least, it's a lot of money.
It is. I think she used the money to do a master's program in jazz. In fact, it's what she was interested. So you mentioned that you started playing by ear and then went to training a little bit more rigorous, but your passion is for teaching. Talk more about your performance, Kevin. I always enjoyed listening to you playing, and even playing with you was a lot of fun.
Well, I love it. I love to play, and when I was little, my parents always said I was a stage animal because I wanted to create a stage wherever I was. And for me now, I recently got tenure at my university, and I had to count how many things I had done. I think in the last 5 years, I had done almost 1,000 different performances. So I play a lot. And before COVID, I was on the road a lot. I was performing quite a bit all over the country and a little bit abroad. And I don't think I ever want to quite go back to being as busy as I was, but I can't wait until I can start playing in front of audiences again. I had no desire to do Zoom recitals. I had no desire to do a lot of the Facebook Live things that a lot of people were doing, because for me, the magic of music is being in a room with other people and feeling that incredible sort of metaphysical exchange we get when we're playing all of this great music that some people might have never heard before. Some may have heard it many, many times. But in the end, hopefully you give every person in that room an experience they would not have had anywhere else that evening. And to me, that's what's so incredible about the music we get to share. Whether it's incredible, it's sort of light, happy music or whether it's profoundly sad. I think if we can touch somebody in a way that they have not felt, or maybe even tap into emotions they haven't been able to tap into with words, that's one of the greatest things we can do as musicians. And that's what keeps me going to the piano every day. I mean, I love to play, but I always want to be learning some new repertoire. But I love now going back to a lot of the pieces that I played when I was in college, when I was in high school, and finding so much more depth in them, finding so much more meaning in them. Because obviously I'm now in my mid-40s, so I've had a lot more life to live at this point. And it really, I think, makes you understand all of the incredible amount of hurt and pain and joy that these composers all brought to these works at different points in their life. And I think it's the great thing about what we do. Some of the pieces I've been playing now for over 30 years, and I play them differently now than I played them 5 years ago, and differently than how I played them 10 years ago and 20 years ago. Because as we live, the music grows with us. And I think that's what's going to always keep me going back to the piano and keep wanting to be in front of audiences. Because it's having those opportunities to see how I'm growing, and sometimes I'm not even aware of it. I play the Schumann scenes from childhood pretty often, the Kinderszenen, and I recently played it for someone who heard me play them maybe 10 years ago, and they said, "Wow, that's different."
Yeah.
And I wasn't even aware of how it had changed, but it just timing and how I hear some of the movements now that I have little nieces that I've sort of seen how they reflect on childhood. I mean, everything I think that happens to us, it may seem mundane on a day-to-day basis, but over time, all of those little mundane daily experiences have profound impacts on us.
Yeah, and I always believe that we can always improve as well as musicians. And I've been playing music since I'm a long time ago. And every time I play differently. And I'm better, or sometimes I'm worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny. I'm going to show, and again, I'm going to be the tech person here. I'm going to share my video with you. And here you are playing a mazurka. And I think it's somewhere I need to share with audio. And
while she's getting that up, this was recorded at the request of a friend in Costa Rica.
Okay.
He was planning a cycle of all the mazurkas and reached out to many of us to ask if we'd be willing to record one. So this one was my contribution.
And that was broadcast how? In YouTube or?
Yeah, he just had each of us record them separately.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, you can see all the mess on top of my piano at home.
All right. Fortunately, I have to stop. But one of the things that I think as a young pianist was really hard was to know what to do with the phrase and the timing. And I always depended on my teacher. And I think as you get older, it seems like the music says that to you.
It does. I mean, I have to say, growing up, I played one mazurka. I played the D major from Opus 33, I think. And I really did not feel comfortable with it. I didn't get it. And my teacher beat me over the head with it. And I think he couldn't understand why I couldn't get it. So I was really nervous about learning a mazurka because I'd never played one since. I learned the Opus 17 mazurkas a few years ago, but not performed them in public. And when I started learning this one, I was amazed. It did totally make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of the rhythmic inflections, I may not do them the way somebody else does them, but they made sense to me. And so I went back and learned Opus 17, and I've learned several other mazurkas since then. And I think it's incredibly personal, gorgeous music.
I had lunch. I had the privilege to have lunch with Nelson Freire one time I was in Brazil. Well, we were in a party, and they put me sitting beside him and said, wow, "You're going to entertain him." And I think he entertained me. But anyway, he said that one of the hardest things is not playing the notes, but it's playing between the notes.
That's what I tell my students. You know, music is not the notes. It's what happens in between them. Yep. And I feel like that's where artistry happens. And that's what listening is. I mean, we talk about listening so much as teachers. And I tell my students, what you're doing is hearing.
Yeah.
Hearing and listening are two different things. Listening is really, in many ways, pre-listening, so that you're always wanting to hear in your inner ear what you want to achieve in the next 2 or 3 seconds. But it's also being attuned to what's happening in between the spaces of sound that we have.
Yeah. I would like also to show another performance of yours. Talk a little bit about the Bernstein work that you played with the orchestra.
Yeah, several years ago for the Leonard Bernstein's anniversary, the conductor at UA approached me about playing his Symphony No. 2, at the Age of Anxiety. I honestly didn't know the piece. I knew it existed but didn't really know anyone who had played it. So, of course, it was a chance to play with orchestra. So I said, of course I'll do it. And then I got the score in the mail and nearly had a heart attack when I saw how hard it was. But it was one of the great experiences I've had with a piece. I hope I get to play it again in my lifetime. The work is based on a poem by W.H. Auden, and it's incredibly diffuse. It has lots of different sections. If it's not a piece I would encourage you to go listen to it 5 times. Because there's a jazz scherzo, there's a theme and variations, the theme comes back at the end. I mean, it's an incredibly well worked out piece, and this orchestration is absolutely incredible. The colors he gets out of the orchestra, and you'll notice I did not play this from memory. I don't think I would ever try to play this from memory with the orchestra, because it's like chamber music with an orchestra. The piano's so integrated so often into the textures. But I think it's a tremendous work.
Well, let's hear that. And again, as you said, I don't know the work. I've never played. I know of the work. So here it is. In what orchestra is that, Kevin?
This is the university orchestra at the University of Alabama, the Huxford Symphony. So these are all students that I'm playing with. And if you're interested in hearing the whole piece, I have the whole thing on YouTube. I assume Rose is just going to play a clip of it now. And there's a number of really famous recordings of it. It got played a few times during the Bernstein anniversary, but I think you'll hear it's just such a huge orchestration. Not a lot of people program it because it's expensive, unfortunately.
Let's hear. Yeah.
What you heard there was essentially the theme in the first variation.
I see.
And I think there's about 12 variations total in that first movement.
And why the name symphony?
He thought of it as more of a concertante work. He didn't think of it as a piano concerto, even though I think really it is a piano concerto. But I think he wanted to emphasize the fact that the piano was very integrated into the whole texture.
All right. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm always mesmerized by Bernstein orchestration.
Yeah.
He was a fabulous pianist.
Oh, you can tell he wrote for his hands. I mean, there were some passages I just had to keep trying to figure out exactly how he felt it so I could find the fingering that would work.
Like big hand, isn't it?
Yeah, big hand and agile, very agile at the keyboard.
He is a fabulous. I always watch his videos where he's conducting and performing at the same time.
Yeah, it's a Ravel concerto. I mean, incredible what he could do.
Yeah, yeah. What is your advice for a young musician, young pianist? Because it's clear that pianists and any other musician, we do so much more than just playing the piano. So what is your advice for a young musician right now?
If you know that music is your destiny, because I think music chooses us, then take advantage of every possible opportunity that comes your way. I think I have never regretted saying yes to playing somewhere. Especially when I was growing up, my teacher made me perform almost weekly in recitals. We had recitals almost every Saturday. So any chance you have to be in front of an audience, take it. Because that is the hardest part of performing, I think, for many of us, is finding an ease in front of an audience and learning to have a healthy relationship with performing. Mm-hmm. And I think the only way to do that is by doing it a lot. And one of my students asked me, they said, Dr. Chance, don't you get nervous? I said, no, not really. Because I now have done it enough that I trust that I'm practicing well. I trust that I know I'm going to be able to handle whatever happens on stage. And I also acknowledge that I'm human. Mm. I think so often we don't recognize that we're human when we're musicians because the art is always greater than we are. And part of what I've really had to come to terms with is every time I sit down at the piano, I have to give myself permission to not be perfect, but demand that I be as good as I can be. And that, I think, it's a very long journey to get to a point where you can do that. But when you reach that point is where you can start truly enjoying your time on stage and enjoying the incredible energy that can happen between you and an audience. When performing is about you, it's no longer about the music.
Exactly. Yeah. And becomes very hard.
Absolutely. The more it's about you, nerves come from us. They don't come from the music.
Yeah.
If you're nervous, it's because so frequently either you're not practicing well or you have an unhealthy relationship with what you're doing. you're there for the music. You're a vessel for the music. And if you've done the right preparation, the music will flow through you. But if we put ourselves in the middle of that consciously, that's where nerves come in and can really cause problems with our relationship with what we're doing.
Do you think it's important to be a soloist as well as a chamber musician?
Yes. I think the days are gone of Carnegie Hall knocking on our doors to come play solo recitals. I play solo recitals every year. I play concertos pretty regularly. I play collaborative concerts the most. Mm-hmm. And those are what pay the bills. And I mean, I love getting the opportunity to be on stage with my friends. This fall, I'm going to be playing the Mozart Wind Quintet and the Dvorak Piano Quintet, and on the same concert. So I'll get to work with my woodwind colleagues on the Mozart and then my string colleagues on the Dvorak. And I can't wait for that recital, because as a pianist, what that tells me is I'm going to get to experience all the colors the woodwinds can bring and all the colors the strings can bring, which is going to challenge me to really get everything I can out of that piano. So I can't wait for that performance. And then we're going to do the Dvorak piano quartet in the spring. And I haven't figured out what else to put with that. But it's the first time I've done the Dvorak quintet, and I'm really excited to get to play it.
Yeah, I enjoy playing with colleagues because I learned a lot from them as well. Yeah. Kevin, I can't thank you enough. I really cannot thank you. So a lot of people sent their best wishes and they enjoyed the interview.
Thank you.
And we have people from Portugal, from Brazil, and there's some Spanish here too. So I don't know where, but I really appreciate you. I appreciate you as a friend and as a colleague. And I wish you the best. And I hope to be performing with you soon. We still would like to do a two pianos recital soon.
Without crazy bar talk.
Although I would love to do that again, to tell the truth.
At some point, I would like to. I think when we did it, it was my 6th or 7th time playing it, and I want to do it again.
See, but that was my first time.
Yeah, it was, and it helps to have somebody who's done it before.
Yes.
But I think at one point we had talked about doing some Brazilian music, and I hope that gets to happen soon.
Well, we can do that. So I thank you. I would like for you to stay a little longer, just so they're going to take out the image, but I'll see you later when they shut down, so I can thank you personally. And again, this is... I'm going to speak in Português now, excuse me. Esse é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas com a Reitoria Digital da Universidade Federal de Goiás e a Mississippi State University. Temos o apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central. Fazem parte desse programa Andréa Luísa Teixeira, coordenadora, Caroline Porto, Pablo Lisboa, eu, Sérgio de Paiva e Wesley de Menezes. Mais uma vez, obrigada a todos por assistirem o programa e convido-os para a semana que vem assistir a entrevista que a Andréa fará. E assim, toda semana, às 5 horas da tarde no Brasil, 3 horas nos Estados Unidos, 8 horas em Portugal. E convido a todos para sempre participar. Muito obrigada. Thank you very much, Kevin Chance, for being part of this interview. And I appreciate everybody that listened to our interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.